Okay, hello everyone. We'll continue from where I had stopped in the previous clip that I had uploaded. Hope the first few lines of the lesson were clear to you. We understood how Gandhiji tries to urge, he makes a plea to Hitler to give up his acts of destruction and to follow the principles of universal peace and harmony. And he also tries to communicate the fact that individuals who believe in the ideals and values of brotherhood, peace, and love would never be able to tolerate or accept such acts of destruction and oppression. Okay, so for the sake of continuity, I'll read from the text starting from the line where I had stopped in the previous clip. But your own writings and pronouncements and those of your friends and admirers leave no room for doubt that many of your acts are monstrous and unbecoming of human dignity. So, in terms of this sentence, Gandhiji tries to communicate this idea that the deeds and actions of Hitler have in fact brought a bad name upon him and are totally unworthy of his persona. That is, his deeds are monstrous and not fitting the very ideals of human dignity, peace, and harmony, particularly for those people who believe in the value of universal friendliness, universal peace. Now, Gandhiji tries to elaborate upon such deeds that have actually put a black mark on Hitler. So, I'm continuing from that point. Such are your humiliation of Czechoslovakia, the rape of Poland, and the swallowing of Denmark. So, Gandhiji tries to give instances of the bad deeds committed by Hitler, which are really very oppressive and which go against the principles of human dignity and value. Okay, so he says that such are your humiliation of Czechoslovakia. Now, three countries have been mentioned here, and I'll start with the first one. That is, he talks about the humiliation of Czechoslovakia. He is actually hinting at Hitler's invasion of Czechoslovakia, which happened or which started just before the Second World War. I hope all of you know the period of the Second World War, that is from 1939 to 1945. And the invasion of Czechoslovakia had begun in 1938 itself, as per the Munich Pact. Hitler was supposed to have certain areas of Czechoslovakia under his control, and this too was in the name of protecting certain ethnic Germans who resided in those areas of Czechoslovakia. To be more precise, these areas of Czechoslovakia were known under the name Sudetenland. So, as per that Munich agreement, Hitler had control over those areas of Czechoslovakia, and those areas were like surrendered to him. But very soon, Hitler could extend his control over the entire nation, that is, over entire Czechoslovakia, because Czechoslovakia became rather very weak with the giving up of those areas, and it was quite easy for the Nazi control to be imposed upon them. So this is what happened with regard to the usage here, humiliation of Czechoslovakia. Then the rape of Poland, which I feel all of you know. Here what is hinted at is the invasion of Poland, which officially inaugurated the Second World War. And the last one is the swallowing of Denmark. Now this actually refers to a very short military occupation uh, that was done to capture Norway. Actually, the intention was not to gain control over Denmark. Denmark was like a kind of a pathway to control the most strategically located Norway, and this was done to deal with the attack of Britain. So it was like a kind of a long winding process, and for this purpose, the first step was to conquer Denmark. So it was a kind of a short military occupation to actually gain control over the strategically located Norway. Now, let me continue. I am aware that your view of life regards such spoliations as virtuous acts. Now, this sentence is very, very meaningful, because here Gandhiji says that Hitler would never consider such acts of his or the Nazis as against humanity, or as very, very deplorable crimes, because he believes in his own ideology, which tries to glorify a fierce kind of nationalism. And in order to implement that kind of a nationalistic spirit, he is actually doing such things. For example, the very conquering of areas of Czechoslovakia was done in the name of protecting certain um, ethnic Germans who were residing in that area. So this was like he was trying to abide by this principle of pan-Germanism, as I told in the introduction, trying to unite all Germans, trying to instill that feeling of Germanic pride, that nationalistic pride in the German people. So it was an attempt to unite all Germans scattered across different parts of Europe. So for a person who believes in this kind of an ideology, the acts and deeds that are done to uh, enforce this ideology would never be considered as vicious or as against the goodness of humanity. These deeds would be treated or hailed only as virtuous acts. That is why Gandhiji says that I'm aware that your view of life regards such spoliations as virtuous acts, because Hitler and the Nazis would consider these acts as only virtuous deeds or good deeds, patriotic acts which are done to unite Germans as a whole. But we have been taught from childhood to regard them as acts degrading humanity. As Gandhiji says, the truth is that those people who believe in the principles of non-violence, who believe in the principles of humanitarian concern and universal harmony, would never be able to justify such acts. No matter what justifications you might put forward, no matter what arguments you might put forward in favor of such acts, those people who believe in the principles of universal harmony would never be able to accept such crimes that are committed by people, such acts of oppression, such acts of torture. Okay, hence we cannot possibly wish success to your arms. So he's saying that how can we even think of wishing you good luck? Because what you are indulging is not something that we can approve of. It is something that has to be condemned. It's not a good act. Okay, but ours is a unique position. We resist British imperialism no less than Nazism. So Gandhiji now reveals the unique position that every Indian individual finds himself or herself in, because India was under British control, and India was also one nation that was going through the impact of British colonialism. And he tries to communicate this idea that British imperialism and Nazism are just two sides of the same coin. You cannot actually differentiate between the two. You cannot say which is better of the lot. You can only say that if there is a difference, it is only in degree. You can only say which is more oppressive and which is less oppressive. You cannot say that one is not oppression and the other one is oppression. So he again gives out a very important concept, that is, even if it is imperialistic domination or even if it is dictatorial oppression like Nazism, both are two sides of the same coin and both need to be condemned and both cannot be glorified in any manner. Okay, that is why he says if there is a difference, it's only in degree. Then, 1/5 of the human race has been brought under the British heel. Again, Gandhiji is referring to the impact of British colonialism and says that almost 1/5 of humanity has been brought under the control of British colonialism. It is like the country has dominated different parts of the world and has been enforcing a policy of domination and oppression. And Gandhiji adds that this kind of a colonialist domination has been enforced or implemented by means that will not bear scrutiny. That is, the strategies used, the means used, the techniques used to bring a certain group of people, to bring a whole nation under the control of another, as the Britishers have done, cannot be justified. These techniques and strategies will not bear scrutiny. That is, they cannot even resist any kind of critical observation. That is, they are so deplorable. These strategies and techniques that are used, they cannot be justified in any manner. You cannot argue in favor of such kinds of domination. That is why he says that 1/5 of the human race has been brought under the British heel by means, that is, using techniques, methods, through deceit, through oppression. These are the different techniques that the colonizers have used to bring the colonized people, the so-called colonized people, under their full control. And such methods and techniques will be condemned forever. Such methods and techniques will not bear scrutiny. That is, they would just disintegrate if somebody were to deconstruct what has been done in the name of colonialism. That is, no argument can support such heinous deeds. Okay, we'll continue. Our resistance to it does not mean harm to the British people. So Gandhiji is now, in the next few lines, he's trying to illustrate what has been done with regard to British oppression in the case of India. That is how, following the policy of non-violence and non-cooperation without resorting to any kind of physical violence, the Indians have tried to resist such colonialist oppression. So, we'll see how Gandhiji puts that idea here. Our resistance to it does not mean harm to the British people. We seek to convert them, not to defeat them on the battlefield. So Gandhiji makes it clear that we have not opted any kind of physical violence. We have not tried to deal with the British army on the battlefield. We have not invited them for any kind of a war, for any kind of a physical combat. We have only tried to resist their oppression in a different manner, probably by trying to convert them, by trying to change their ideology, by making them think in a much more considerate and positive manner, which would be useful for the Indian natives. We'll continue. Ours is an unarmed revolt against the British rule. But whether we convert them or not, we are determined to make their rule impossible by non-violent non-cooperation. So he reiterates the fact that ours is an unarmed revolt against the British rule. We do not prefer or we do not call for a kind of a physical attack, a kind of war, against the Britishers, which would cause the death of many Britishers, which would be like harming them. We do not want any act of violence in the name of gaining independence. And Gandhiji adds that whether we convert them or not, that means that whether we are successful or not in converting them, in changing their ideology, in changing their attitude, we are determined to make their rule impossible by non-violent, non-cooperation. In other words, Gandhiji makes it clear that the Britishers would be able to successfully dominate the Indian natives only if the Indian natives cooperate, only if the Indian natives obey whatever the Britishers demand from them. If the Indian natives adopt a policy of non-violent, non-cooperation, then it would be almost impossible for the Britishers to enforce their rule. So it's as simple as that, and there is no amount of violence involved in it. So, in every manner, this is the most acceptable method or strategy to deal with these kinds of oppression. Let me continue. It is a method in its nature indefensible. That is, the method that Gandhiji has just now talked about is a method that is indefensible. Indefensible means it cannot be justified by any kind of argument. It is a method in its nature indefensible. Intrinsically, it is something that cannot be justified by any kind of argument. It is not justifiable by any kind of argument. And it is based on the knowledge that no spoliator can compass his end without a certain degree of cooperation, willing or compulsory, of the victim. So this is something that I just explained to you. So he's saying that no arguments can be put against such methods of non-violence and non-cooperation, because basically the underlying principle is that no spoliator, that is, nobody who tries to destroy, can compass his end, can compass his end means can accomplish his end, that is his purpose, without a certain degree of cooperation, willing or compulsory, of the victim. So this is something that I explained. Gandhiji says that no oppressor or no colonizer, no person who is keen on destroying somebody else, who is keen on controlling somebody else, can accomplish his purpose without a certain degree of cooperation on the side of the other person, cooperation on the side of the victim. Because if somebody can control you, means that you are succumbing to that control, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Either you are willing to come under that control, or you are forced to come under that control. In both ways, your cooperation, that is the cooperation of the victim, is necessary. And here, who is the victim? It is the Indian native, the colonized. So if the colonized decides that he is not going to submit himself to this kind of a control, what will the colonizer do? The colonizer will never be able to attain his purpose. The colonizer will never be able to accomplish his purpose. Okay, I hope this idea is clear. Our rulers may have our land and bodies, but not our souls. They can have the former only by complete destruction of every Indian man, woman, and child. That all may not rise to that degree of heroism, and that a fair amount of frightfulness can bend the back of revolt is true. But the argument would be beside the point. For if a fair number of men and women be found in India who would be prepared without any ill will against the spoliators to lay down their lives rather than bend the knee to them, they would have shown the way to freedom from the tyranny of violence. So these sentences are all connected. So let me start from the line given here. They can have the former only by complete destruction of every Indian. Now, what is the former mentioned here? Just the previous line says that Our rulers may have our land and bodies, but not our souls. So Gandhiji says that the British oppressors, the British colonizers, they may have control over our land, over our property, over whatever is physical, over whatever is tangible. Okay? They may have control over our land and bodies. They might capture our bodies, they might torture us, they might commit physical harm to every Indian, but they can never control or capture our souls. Our souls will never surrender to them. And he continues, they can have the former. Former means here referring to what was mentioned first in the previous line, that is our land and bodies. They can have the former, that is our land and bodies, only by complete destruction of every Indian. So, only if they succeed in destroying every Indian individual, whether it is man or woman or even a small child, they'll be able to acquire or control or seize their bodies and properties. However, there is a point that has to be noted, that all may not rise to that degree of heroism, and that a fair amount of rightfulness can bend the back of revolt is true. But the argument would be beside the point. So he says that some people might argue that Britishers have more power, the oppressors have more power. So, with that power, they can seize the property of the Indian natives, they can control the bodies, they can hold them as prisoners, probably. They can take full control over the Indian natives. So, what will happen? But Gandhiji here says that though Britishers or the colonizers can probably control the Indian colonized in this manner, the point to be noted is that they can never capture the souls of Indians. Those souls will never be surrendered to British oppression. And he says that Britishers can control the Indian natives only by complete destruction of every Indian here. And sometimes you might also argue that every Indian may not be strong, or every Indian may not be able to rise to that level of heroism, because that degree of heroism is needed to actually resist this amount of oppression. So, all natives may not have that potential, all may not rise to that high level of heroism, and some people may also become weak with a fair amount of frightfulness. That is, it's absolutely natural that on seeing the spectacle of oppression and control, some people might lose their strength and they might become weak. That is why Gandhiji says that all may not rise to that degree of heroism, and that a fair amount of rightfulness can bend the back of revolt is true. But the argument would be beside the point. That is, some people might become weak, some people might not have the strength to resist in full force this kind of an oppression, because fear is also a natural emotion in this context. But even that argument cannot stand. For, let me continue, if a fair number of men and women be found in India who would be prepared without any ill will against the spoliators to lay down their lives rather than bend the knee to them, they would have shown the way to freedom from the tyranny of violence. So he says that it is not necessary that all Indians or the entire colonized group should revolt against the Britishers. At least a small amount of men and women who would be ready to sacrifice their lives for the cause of independence, for the cause of India's freedom, resisting any attempt to control them, would set themselves as best models or examples for attainment of freedom, for freedom from violence. So that means that we needn't lose hope, because always the nation will guarantee at least a small group, if not large, a small group of men and women who would be ready to sacrifice their precious lives for the cause of India's independence, for the betterment of Indian society, the nation as a whole. And that would set an example that could be emulated by generations to follow. I ask you to believe me when I say that you will find an unexpected number of such men and women in India. And Gandhiji is confident, and he says that even though I just said that, imagine a situation where at least a few people would be ready to lay down their lives. You have to note the point that in India, you can find an unexpected number of such individuals who are ready to fight, who are ready to sacrifice, who are ready to lay down their lives for the cause of India. And the last line of this para, they have been having that training for the past 20 years. It's a very, very significant statement. He says that it's a kind of an affirmation, that is, Gandhiji tries to leave no doubt regarding the fact that whether India has the potential to fight back or not. He affirms, he reiterates, he strongly upholds the courage, the strength, the integrity of the Indians by repeating again and again that they have the power to withstand any kind of humiliation, any kind of torture imposed upon them by the colonizers. And the training that they have been having for not just 1 or 2 years, but for a whole period of 20 years is more than enough to withstand this kind of an oppression. So, dear students, I'm stopping here for the time being. I hope you would go through the lessons posted so far, and I'll continue in the next clip. I'll inform you of the time when I would be uploading the next clip. So thank you for now. Bye.